How did you come to be cast in Pirates of the Caribbean?
Well, that's many years later, but I had been Disney had offered me a film called Hidalgo, when it was about a man and his horse in the desert and stuff, and I read the screenplay, and I just didn't think it was for me, but I wanted to have a meeting with them because at that point I had a 2-year-old, two and a half year old daughter, and so, or three, and for 3 years I watched nothing but animated films, cartoons from Tex Avery to Bugs Bunny to that was all I watched with my little girl, and I received the screenplay for Pirates, and it was I somehow in my mind I saw this opportunity, like a way to mesh characters like cartoon characters. For example, Wile E. Coyote gets a boulder dropped on his head and he's completely crushed, but they cut to the next scene and he's just got a little bandage on his head. So I started thinking about the parameters that were available to cartoon characters, and if they were available to cartoon characters, and nobody ever asked a question, whether you were 5 or 95, you didn't ask a question. Oh, Wile E. Coyote, of course he's still alive. So I tried to incorporate these kind of ideas into the character of Captain Jack Sparrow, so that I could try to push those parameters and control the sort of suspension of disbelief, to be able to control the characters' actions, words, movements, and put them in a place where the things that he would do or say were so either ludicrous or mainly something that also something the cartoon characters can get away with things we can't. Captain Jack Sparrow can do things that I could never do. He could say things that I could never say. So it was for me a way to stretch the parameters of a character and take a risk in doing that. But if it panned out, and I felt I was on a pretty good mission. If it panned out, I thought that it might be a character who would be accepted by 5-year-olds and 45-year-olds and 65-year-olds and 85-year-olds, and in the same way that Bugs Bunny is,
You mentioned
believed.
You mentioned that you received the script. When was that?
I'm sorry?
When did you first receive the script for Pirates of the Caribbean?
The first screenplay I received was 2002, I believe. Yeah, 2002.
And what did you think of that script when you received it?
I thought that it had all the kind of hallmarks of a Disney film. That is to say, a kind of a predictable 3-act structure, and the character of Captain Jack was more he was more like a swashbuckler type that would kind of swing in shirtless and, you know, be the hero. And I had quite different ideas about the character, so I incorporated my notes into character and brought that character to life, much to the chagrin of Disney initially.
Now, when you say you made changes to the character, how did you do that?
Just, you know, in preparation, you know, the very same way that I've ever approached any character. You look for a back history. You base it on, you know, it could be anything. Like Edward Scissorhands, for example, I based on a dog that I'd had and newborn babies. My sister had a couple of new babies, and I watched them, you know, because I thought that Edward would see things from the sort of from a place of innocence and not knowing exactly what things meant or were, and also that look of a pure, innocent child when they experience something for the first time. Those were the two main ingredients that I thought would serve the character. And with Captain Jack, again, the cartoons, you know, the Pepe Le Pew, it's like making a soup, you know. It's ingredients. It's just ingredients. There's some Pepe Le Pew in there. There's some Keith Richards in there. There's a bit of you know, I figured this is a guy who's been on the sea for the majority of his life. Quite possibly his brains may have been scrambled a bit by the sun. And also I thought that he'd been on the sea for so long that he had his sea legs, but when he got on land, he just didn't have his land legs. So he could never quite stand still.
How did the film ultimately turn out in your view?
I didn't see it. But I believe that the film, well, I mean, the film did pretty well apparently, and they wanted to keep going, making more, and I was fine to do that. There's great freedom in being able to. It's not like you become that person, but if you know that character to the degree that I did, because he was not what the writers wrote, so they really weren't able to write for him. So once you know a character better than the writers, that's when you have to be true to the character and add your words, add the rewrites. I was, I believed in the character wholeheartedly, and initially the Disney folks were somewhat upset.
Now, you mentioned that the film was, to your understanding, a great success. How did your life change after the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie came out?
Though I'd been around for many years already, and people knew who I was and all that. After Pirates 1 came out, there was a completely different. It was a completely different way of life was being sort of, my family and I were being plunged into. That is to say, at our house in Los Angeles, you would have people trying to climb the gates to get in to see Captain Jack Sparrow. You would have people trying to bust in the gates dressed as Captain Jack Sparrow. You would have and follow you and your family. So that was the moment when there was no other way but to we had to hire more security guards, and I was certainly worried for my kids' safety. And so then that's when instead of just the one guy, there became several security people, because I wanted to make sure that my kids were safe when they went to school, or when they went to Disneyland, or when they went to the mall, or whatever. So yes, more security, and then just getting followed, by hordes of paparazzi and things like that. It's I've had worse jobs, certainly. I can't complain about it, but after a while you realize that anonymity has left the building a long time ago. Anonymity's gone, and that's an odd thing to deal with. When you can't just drive down to the diner and get a cup of coffee or something. It's not possible. It turns into something else altogether. So it's acceptance, and of course there's a bit of sacrifice involved. I can't complain about the work that I've been given. I can't complain about any of that. I have no right to. But it does make you have to think very creatively when you've got little kids, about how to take them to the park, or to the swings, or to the this or that, or movie, or it becomes a strategic mission, and that's what happened after Pirates.
Now, you mentioned your family. Who did your family consist of at that time?
Vanessa, Parody, the mother of my children, who we were together for 14, 15 years. Myself, our daughter Lily Rose, and our boy Jack.
Now, you mentioned hiring more security. Did you already have a security team at the time that Pirates of the Caribbean came out?
Yes, because there'd been more films prior to that. I mean, a number of films prior to that. So I was recognized, and I was known. So if you wanted to attempt to have any experience that might be normal, you sort of had to have somebody around to get you out of a squirrely situation should it arise. So I had security prior to that for who would travel with myself and my family. But not like, when I was at work. Back then I didn't have security at work so much, not before Pirates. Pirates was really that was the thing that everything, it all turned around. It all just went weird.
So how did your security team change after Pirates of the Caribbean came out?
Well, like I said, with anything, it become more strategic, and you had to have more guys or gals, because if Vanessa, for example, she worked in France quite a lot, and if she was in France, and I was in LA with the kiddies, then and working, security would basically pick my kids up at school or whatever and bring them home. So that became the routine, driving them to school, bringing them home. So yeah, and then if I went somewhere, it just, the security guards kind of multiplied, because you needed to protect your street, your house, your kids. Endless.
So after Pirates of the Caribbean, who has been on your security team?
Jerry Judge was with me for, oh boy, over 20 years. Jerry Judge we've mentioned it before. It was a year or two ago. Jerry would go on film sets with me. He would do reconnaissance missions. You know, that is to say, he would go to a country before we would go there, make sure all the hotel rooms were all taken care of and such. Or when I went on tour with, say, the Hollywood Vampires, which is a band that I played with, he would come on the road with me with another security guard. So there was Jerry Judge, there was Malcolm Connolly, who's been with me for 20 years or more, Leonard Damian, Sean Bett, Travis McGivern, Mark Gibbs. I mean, there are a few.
Are all of these security personnel still with you today?
Jerry has gone on to somewhere else. Jerry passed away from cancer, so Jerry made his exit. But the majority of those, I believe all of those fellows are still with me, yes.
When did Mr. Judge pass away?
I believe it was two years ago, roughly. Maybe a little less than 2 years ago.
Now I'd like to go through a couple of the names that you just mentioned. What is Malcolm Conley's purview in the realm of your security team?
What is his role?
Exactly, yes.
Well, now that Jerry is, Jerry and Malcolm had worked together for a very long time, so I'd met Malcolm through Jerry. After Jerry's passing, Malcolm obviously took over for Jerry, and so he took on extra responsibilities. He would have to make sure that there was someone on the ground wherever we were going that had done their recon, the reconnaissance, and to make sure that everything was set up by the time we got there, and that it would be a straight shot into the hotel without a gaggle of paparazzi. You didn't have to walk through 50 screaming, hollering photographers. So, you'd go in through a garage door and through a slippery kitchen, and then you were taken to your room where you stayed.
When did Malcolm Conley join your team?
Malcolm had joined, Jerry brought him on, so Malcolm has been with me for over 20 years now.
And in those 20 years, how often have you physically been present with Malcolm?
With Malcolm?
Yes.
Endless, countless, all over the world. Everywhere. Los Angeles, Japan, Serbia, films, tour. Malcolm was my, when we were on the Vampires tour in Europe, throughout Europe, and Malcolm was on the bus with me. We lived on the bus together, basically.
How often is Malcolm in LA with you?
It depends if there's or if there was a larger premiere, where where it had to be worked out so that it didn't turn into a chaotic or dangerous event, because sometimes there are, between you and the people, there are these barriers, and sometimes the professional photographers or the professional autograph people will surge forward, and in the front rows of these, behind these barriers, you have little kids and older women and older men, and so when the professionals would surge forward, these people would start getting kind of crushed against this metal deterrent, and that was the most worrisome thing when you're at a premiere and there are thousands and thousands of people there, and I've always called it running the gauntlet. Essentially what it is that people are there to say hi and to support the film or the cast or whatever. So I've always gone out and signed for those people. I've always gone out and signed for all or as many as I possibly could. I mean, to the point of sometimes Jerry Judge would literally pick me up off the ground to make me stop signing, take me away. So, yeah, it was those kind of things. Again, you don't really get used to that, so I forget what the original part of your question was. I got lost in the gauntlet.
I'll move on. What about Sean Bett? How long is...
You want to go ahead and take a break now? Would that be okay for afternoon break?
Fine. That's fine.
Why don't we go ahead and do that? Ladies and gentlemen, we'll go ahead and take our afternoon break. Please do, we'll take 15 minutes. Do not discuss the case and do not do any outside research, okay? Thank you. Stay there for a minute. Thank you. All right. So just a reminder, since you're on the witness stand now, you cannot discuss your testimony with anybody, to include your attorneys, okay? All right. And let's come back. I guess we can come back at 3:35. Is that okay for everybody? Okay. We'll take a recess. Thank you.
Thank you.
All rise.